Hello everyone, welcome to this webinar on how to improve your score by 100 plus points in 40 days. I'm Piyush and I'm going to be a main host today. And before I speak, I just want to ensure that all of you can hear me clearly. So before I start this webinar, very quickly, a quick vote in terms of just to see how if you guys are able to hear me loud and clear. So please respond to this poll if you're able to hear me loud and clear. That will give me a pretty good idea as to whether my voice is clear to you or not. In the meantime, let me start sharing my screen as well. So you should be able to see the screen now. Okay, so I see almost all of you are able to hear me. That's great to know. Great, guys. So let's get started with the webinar. So quickly, I just want to understand a little about you guys as well. So a warm welcome to all of you. Those of you who have just joined. I'm Piyush and I'm going to be your main host in the webinar today. I'll tell about myself as well, but let's get to know you also a little. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions. The first question that I'm going to ask is, since how long have you guys been preparing for the GMAT? So there's a poll on your screen. You should be able to see it now. So I want to understand, like, since when are you guys preparing for the GMAT? Just to get a sense of how, let's say, how far ahead in terms of the prep the batch that I'm discussing today is. So let's understand that from you. Okay, so I'll wait for a few more waits to come in. Okay, let's see a few more votes. That will be great, good to go ahead. All right, so I have a decent number of votes. I still see more people joining in, so I'll wait maybe a little more for the votes to come in. Okay. Great, guys. I have a decent number of votes. I see more or less the votes have stabilized now. So let me end the poll now. Okay. So I see that a quarter of you have not yet started their prep. So you're very, very new to the GMAT altogether. About 50% of the batch has been preparing for less than 1 month, which kind of practically means that also you guys are also pretty much fresh with your GMAT. Anyone who has been preparing for less than 1 month, I feel that you are very fresh with the GMAT as well. So it seems like most of you are very fresh with the GMAT. There are few people who are having 2 to 3 months of prep time. They have already prepared for 2-3 months. That's good to know. But most of the batch seems to be a little, let's say, fresh in their GMAT journey. Okay, no worries. So let me understand one more thing from you guys. When are you guys planning to take the GMAT? Let's quickly look at that as well, and then let's move forward. When are you guys planning to take the GMAT as well? Just give me an idea of that too. Okay, I see some votes coming in. That's good to see. Okay. Okay, good. Waiting for a few more votes, then maybe 10 more seconds and I'll end the poll then. Okay. Seems like a good number of votes have come in. So, just to ask a question to you guys, those of you who are voting right now, I see most of you saying, okay, I'm ending the poll now. So I see most of you saying that, okay, I'm looking at July to August. So, and a good number of you are applying in, like taking the GMAT in June as well. So it seems like you are pretty much looking for the round one deadlines, right? Most of you are looking for the round one deadlines. And a decent number of you are even looking at, let's say, round 2 or slightly later than that. So no worries, that's good to hear. So it is good, really good to know about you guys as to where you stand in terms of your preparation and your timelines. Again, this webinar is going to help you understand how can you plan your studies in a better fashion. How can you take that final leap to get close to your target score in this timeline that you have with you. Okay, so let's quickly get started with the webinar now. It was great to know about you, about the batch, and we will keep it very, very interactive, basically, and we'll make sure that we answer your questions as well as we go along. Okay. Anirban, round 2 for different colleges start at different times. For US, it's generally in January. For Indian IIMs, let's say it's in October. For European schools also, it's somewhere around October and November. So that's generally the round 2. So it depends on from college to college. So let's get moving. So about me, I'm Piyush. I'm going to be a main host in the webinar. A little about me, though, those of you who don't know me, I have about 9+ years of experience in the education sector. I've taken the GMAT myself, scored a 740 on my first attempt, and I've helped a lot of students improve their GMAT scores over the last 9 years. And I love interacting with students, helping them understand how they can strategize their prep better. And I love analyzing data. So that's something which I really like to do. And in fact, in the webinar today also, I'll actually share certain strategies which I have learned over a period of time through the analysis that I have done for the various data points that we get from the GMAT. So you will see a lot of those things also going through in as part of our presentation today. So that's that's a short overview about me. Preetham, don't worry about the study plan or that thing. We will talk about that as well. Don't worry. Okay. So let's quickly move to the next part. So how have we structured the webinar? So there are 3 parts to this webinar. In fact, very quickly, we will tell you about who we are. We'll not take even 5-10 minutes, just a couple of minutes, and we'll just quickly tell you what is that we do at GMAT-Wiz. And then we will go to the main part of the webinar where we will discuss your strategy to improve your score by 100+ points in this short timeline. And then from there, we will move to the end part. I'm keeping about 25 minutes for the Q&A because I want to make sure that I answer as many questions as you guys as I can in this timeline. Okay. So quickly about GMAT-Wiz, we are world's only truly personalized course in the industry. A lot of courses say they are personalized, say they give a personalized study plan or adaptive course, but none of them are really truly doing that. It's mostly marketing. But at GMAT-Wiz, we truly mean that we truly understand the pain points of students and we give you a personalized study plan, a personalized course at all times. What I mean by that is when anyone comes to our platform, creates an account on our platform, they get access to a study plan, which is created for them, personalized for them, which has weekly task lists based on the times which a person is putting in. So it's not like a template where you get the same plan irrespective of what your current skill level is. It's very dependent on your inputs, your strengths, your weaknesses, and your time availability. And then the course itself that you get is a very unique course. It's not going to be static. It's not going to be the same for every single person who is learning on the platform. You are different. You have your own strengths and weaknesses. And the course has the capability of improving as you go forward. So it will adapt in real time. It will change in real time as it learns more about you based on your strengths and weaknesses. Okay, and anyone who takes up the complete package from GMAT, which is the Quant plus Verbal package, also gets a dedicated mentor assigned to them. So they can speak to their mentors for about 15 minutes every 15 days. And this calls are about progress assessment and improvement. The reason why we give this service is very simple. We have seen in the past that people generally, especially working professionals, sometimes if they don't speak to mentors, they kind of tend to go in the wrong direction. After a couple of months, they realize that they are not headed in the right direction. And then when they have to do that course correction, that takes a lot of time and effort. And many people end up losing a lot of crucial time because of this. So we don't want you to lose that. We want you to focus on the right skills and the right strategies. So this mentors will help you understand that. So any student who takes the complete package gets a dedicated mentor working with us. And that's one of the biggest reasons why GMAT Club is one of the GMAT-Wiz is one of the most effective courses on GMAT Club today. Again, this data is slightly dated, but even today, if I look at our average score improvement for international candidate, it stands at about 114 points, whereas the other players' average score improvement is pretty much the same. So this shows the kind of benefit that we have been able to pass on to students through the AI driven learning platform that we have. Okay, so that was quickly about us. Let's now move to the main part of the webinar. So how have I structured this webinar? So I'll actually talk about I've structured this webinar in two parts. Okay, first we will talk about what most students do when it comes to store improvement. What is the general strategy followed by most of the students? And then we will also talk about what students should actually do. Okay, now let me ask you guys a question again, just a quick understanding from you. Why do we need to talk about what people do? Why don't we quickly jump to what you should be doing? Why not quickly jump to that? Why do we talk about what most people do? Why not directly jump to what you should be doing? Wouldn't that make more sense? Why to talk about what people do in general? Any ideas, guys? Okay, so Anirban says to understand our faults. Okay, good point, Anirban. Alexandra says to learn from their mistakes and experiences. Very, very unique point. Very good point. I like that idea. That makes sense. What do other guys think? Okay, experience matters. We can avoid these mistakes. That's good to know. Okay, and Mark says recognition. Great, guys. Then please jump to it already. Okay, please. Bhavna, again, very important. I kind of like sometimes people say that, okay, it makes more sense to jump to what you should do. But if you don't understand where the problems are, you end up making those mistakes inevitably. So if you don't talk about what the mistakes are and what you should avoid, then if you're not doing them, there's a chance that you might do that in later half. So I don't want that to happen with you. So let's start with what students generally do. So when it comes to what students do, the most important thing that you have to take keep in mind is that most people practice questions. Like when it comes to improving their scores, the first thing that they think about is practicing questions. Okay, so that is one very, very common thing that people do. The second thing which people do is they take a lot of mock tests. Okay, let's take one mock every 3 or 4 days. I kind of hear this from students that they kind of take a lot of mock tests, like every 3-4 days. They have a strategy of taking mocks, analyzing those mocks, and moving forward from there. Then many times people focus also on concept building. These are some of the most common things which people do. Like if they're struggling with to get their scores high, they are looking at working on the mock test. They are looking at the overall let's say practice of more questions. If they're struggling with CR, they will take up more CR questions from the OG, from GMAT Club, even from LSAT, whatever. But they never still are able to improve a lot, because what they don't understand is that this is something which may or may not work for them. And let me tell you why practicing is not that helpful. The reason why practicing is not that helpful is that when you are practicing, you are thinking about the simple fact that whatever you're doing, whatever the processes that you're following are the right processes. You kind of have that mindset with you that I'm following the right processes, and if I use it multiple times, I get better at it. So the saying goes like the practice makes a man perfect. So people take it literally. They think that, okay, if you practice more, you get better. But what you need to understand is you only get better by practicing more when you use the right methods. If you don't use the right methods, if you don't know the right methods, if you're practicing with the wrong method, it's not gonna take you anywhere. Okay, it's not gonna take you anywhere. It is gonna create trouble for you only. You'll be getting better at repeating the same mistake again and again. It's not going to help you out at all. This is something which you also have to understand. Now, why the method or the right method is important? Why not just any shortcut? Why not take up any shortcut which helps us save time? Let's understand that as well. And in order to understand that, we have to understand how the algorithm works. Okay, so let's talk a little about how the GMAT algorithm works. Now, I'm gonna share a very simplistic example with you guys, where I'm gonna share a simple example of 5 questions. So all you see on your screen is 5 questions, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, and Q5 on the x-axis. On the y-axis, you have the difficulty levels mapped out. Now, let's say you're a student who is starting the test. Okay, so generally what happens is when you start the test test starts at a medium difficulty level. And how the GMAT adaptive algorithm works is the difficulty level of the next set of questions depend on how you perform in the previous set of questions. So let's say you started at a medium difficulty level and you got that question correct. Okay. Now what will happen? The moment you get this question correct, the GMAT will serve you a harder question. So the next question which is given to you, let's say question 2, is of medium hard difficulty. And let's assume that you also got this question right. You got this question right as well. Okay, so now what happens is, now GMAT thinks that, okay, you have the capability of getting a medium hard question right as well. So let's now increase your difficulty level to hard. Okay, so they give you a hard question as the third question. Let's assume that you get that right too. So the next question more or less stays at the similar level because there's nothing beyond hard. But let's say you get that question wrong. So the difficulty level will drop again and it will drop to medium hard now. And let's say you get that one wrong as well. So now tell me, if for this student, what do you think is the accuracy and the score that the student has obtained? Can you calculate and tell me what is the accuracy and score that this student has obtained? What is the accuracy and score that this student has obtained according to you? Can you quickly calculate and tell me that? Let's see some responses from you. Very, very easy question, very basic math. Okay, Anirban says it's 12. Sumit says 650 to 700. I'm not sure, Sumit, how did you get that? But I'm talking about looking at the y. Look at the y-axis. Look at the marks assigned to this student, and calculate his score. Okay. Abhijit says it is 4 points. Anirudh also says 4 points. Okay. What about accuracy, guys? 60% accuracy is what V says. Alexandra also says the same. Preetham says 4 points. Okay, guys, understand it this way. This student has gotten a medium question correct. Medium questions carries 3 points. This student has also got a medium hard question correct. That carries 4 points. And he has also gotten a hard question correct, which carries 5 points. So total score by the student, and Shivam, Anjali, Hemant, all of you are correct, is about 12 points, and his accuracy is 60%. Okay, so you can see that from the chart over here. Now let's take a simple, like another example. Let's say there's another student who is taking the test. Okay, obviously he also starts with the same difficulty level, medium question, but instead of getting the first question right, he gets the first question wrong. So what happens then? The next thing that happens is algorithm thinks that, okay, he doesn't have the capability of getting a medium question right. So he gets another, the next question as a easy medium one. And let's say he gets that one wrong too. So obviously his difficulty level will drop to easy now. Okay, let's assume that this question he gets right. So the next question is easy medium, which he again gets right. So the next question is of medium difficulty, and he gets this one right as well. Okay, so now can you calculate the score of this student and tell me score and accuracy of this student and tell me what is the score and accuracy of this student, guys? What do you think is the score and accuracy of this student? The second one. Okay, 6 and 60%. Great, guys. Thank you so much. Very simple math. But what I want you to understand is, look at this data point, guys. Look at this data point. Both these students have the same accuracy, exactly the same accuracy, 60%. And one person has gotten 12 points versus another person has just scored 6 points on the GMAT, like on this particular test. And I can repeat the cycle. I understand this way, that I can repeat the cycle n number of times if I want to, and you'll end up receiving almost a similar score. In fact, the difference will become much more starker. So Same accuracy, very different scores. And this is what I want you to understand. GMAT, unlike other tests, is not dependent on just your accuracy. Anyone who thinks that, okay, if I get more questions right, I'm going to get a higher score, not necessarily true on an adaptive test like GMAT. So if you're chasing accuracy just by doing more and more practice, that's not going to help you. You need to get the right questions correct. You need to show the capability that you have the capability of getting the hard questions right. That's what the algorithm is looking at. That's what you need to understand. Now, what I've shown you is a very simplistic format of how the algorithm works. And GMAT is not this harsh. It does not adapt after each question. It most likely adapts after a block of 3 or 4 questions. I believe in the initial quarters, it adapts a little more than the later quarters. But again, none of this information is out in public. GMAT does not even tell you what is the weightage assigned to each question. So these are weightages that I assumed 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But most likely GMAT has a certain weightage. GMAT definitely assigns more weight to the hard questions than the easy ones. But it's definitely a simplistic version of the algorithm, but it gives you a pretty good picture. So now let's actually move to actual picture of the algorithm. Let's take an exact ESR. This is a enhanced score report, which you can actually buy if you want to after the GMAT is done. Okay, so it's very important that like in case you want to understand where you are in terms of your prep and all, like what our weaknesses are, you should buy the ESR if you have taken the GMAT already. This will help you understand where your gaps are. So look at this ESR right now. This shows us the accuracy of the student in the verbal section across the 4 quarters. So in the first quarter, the student got a couple of questions wrong. In the second quarter, the student got a couple of questions wrong. In the third quarter, there was no mistake done by the student. And in the third quarter, there were 3 questions that he made errors on. So basically, all in all, the student made a total of 7 mistakes. Okay, so this is how the chart can be read. Okay, guys. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you another ESR report on the side. So this ESR is as it is. I'm keeping it exactly this way. I'm adding another ESR on your screen. This student has made a total of 8 mistakes. And what I want you to do is look at the student's chart. I'm not showing you his verbal score. And I want you guys to guess what would be the verbal score of this student. And you can answer your guesses. You can put your guesses in the poll over here. I want to see what is your guess around the score of this particular student. So do let me know. What do you think about the score of this particular student? Okay. Alexandra, yes, GMAT section always starts with medium difficulty level question. That's true. The first question which is given is medium difficulty, and from there on it takes it up. Okay, so I see a good number of responses already. More responses are coming in. Please take your time. I want to see what do you think could be the verbal score of this student. He has made 8 mistakes, just one more mistake over the first guy who made 7 mistakes. What do you think is the verbal score of this student? What do you think is the verbal score of this student? Okay. More and more votes are coming in. So I'll wait for about 10 more seconds, maybe. Okay. I do see a good number of votes already. So I'm gonna end the poll in another 5 seconds. So in case you have not responded, please do so. This is the moment you can respond. Okay. Perfect. So I see most of you going for 34 to 36 and 36 to 37 exactly. So most of you think it should be between 34 and 37. Good number of you think it could be 38 to 39. Some of you even think it is 31 to 33. And a few of you are thinking it should be 40 or more because the scores, the accuracy looks very similar in both the cases. Okay, no worries. I'll reveal the data for the student a little later. Let's add another chart on your screen, guys. Okay, let's add another chart on your screen. So this guy has made a total of 9 mistakes that you can see. I want you to guess the verbal score of this student as well. Okay, I've enabled the poll. Guess the verbal score of this student also. He had made a total of 9 mistakes. What do you think is the verbal score of this student? Okay, I see a good number of votes coming in. Pankaj, I know you know the answer, so I can see that excitement in you. So yeah, I have not even given the right poll options here. But anyway, still a good number of you are voting for 36 to 37, 34 to 35, and 38 to 39 as well. Let me reveal the score of these students, guys. And you will be shocked, probably. A good number of you will be shocked when you see the scores. The first student scored only a verbal 30. The first student scored only a verbal 30. And the next student scored a 21. Okay, so that's the kind of scores that they had. Now tell me, how many of you are thinking that GMAT is a harsh test? How many of you are thinking that GMAT is so harsh? How can you actually have that big a difference in the scores? Like 7 mistakes versus 8 mistakes, and you're dropping the quant verbal score by 11 points. That's a lot. That's a lot. So how many of you think that GMAT is being harsh over here to this particular student, these two students over here? How many of you think that? I have a poll up here. You can do a quick yes, no. Varnika, I think now the background sound should not be that much. I hope it should be okay now. And obviously it becomes more audible to you when I'm not speaking. So don't worry about it. If I'm not speaking, I'll actually mute myself. But I think now it should be fine for you. Okay. So I have some responses in the poll. That's good to see. Okay, more votes still coming in. I think it's stabilized now. So let me end it now. Okay, so 76% of you think that GMAT is being harsh over here. But trust me, guys, GMAT is one of the most standardized tests which is available in the market today. It's like one of the most standardized tests. It tests your skill in the best possible way. In fact, I've seen GMAT going very rarely it goes wrong about your skills, because see, it's not about the accuracy that matters there. What matters is how quickly or how accurately can you get a question of a higher skill level correct. That's what you need to understand. If you remember the simpler example, both students got a 60% accuracy, same accuracy, but the scores were very different. Same thing is happening over here. It's not just about the accuracy, it's actually about the difficulty level. You look at these guys, okay? These are the verbal scores that you saw. Look at the percentiles over here. You'd start thinking that, okay, the number of mistakes are not significantly different. So why that huge a difference in this score? The reason is because the student who got a verbal 30 did not show the capability of getting hard questions right. When the algorithm gave him or her the hard questions, he was not able to score well. In fact, I did not show another ESR. In that ESR, I can even show you one student who has made just 5 mistakes, okay? Just 5 mistakes in the entire verbal section, and the verbal score was 34. To compare these two, you will actually probably not even believe your eyes that with 2 less mistakes, you have less score in verbal. Okay? That is something which kind of shocks a lot of people. Okay? So Mark is saying, so what's the point? Definitely, Mark, we're going to come to the point. So the idea is we need to understand that you end up getting the right questions correct. It's not about getting a higher accuracy, because if you start wrong, let's go to the next slide, Mark. You will actually understand it better now. You look at these two students and look at where they started. Okay, so obviously both students started at a medium difficulty level. Okay, so this is like, again, pardon my drawing over here. So this student started at a medium difficulty level, and in the very beginning itself, he made 4 mistakes in the first quarter. My guess is that in the very beginning itself, he made at least 3 mistakes out of the first 4 questions. How do I know that? I know that because the incorrect questions that you see are at a medium difficulty level itself. Now you look at the incorrect questions of this student. The incorrect questions of this student lies somewhere around here. Okay, much above the medium difficulty. The correct questions lie somewhere around here. Okay, somewhere around this level, like it's still at the same level or slightly better than the previous student is. Okay, so try and understand this, guys. What I'm trying to say is, in the beginning itself, the student who got a verbal 30 did not get the medium questions right. However, this student showed that I have the capability of getting the medium questions right, and that's why the algorithm served him hard questions. Okay, and he only made a couple of mistakes. Understand that as well. He made 4 mistakes. So if he makes 4 mistakes in the beginning, to recover from those 4 mistakes, he has gotten 4 medium level questions wrong. So in order for the algorithm to again build trust in his skills, he have to do significantly better in the harder questions. Now what you see is that in the second quarter also, if you look at the second quarter, there was only 1 mistake made by the student, okay? But the mistake is on a medium question and he is only getting the easy ones right. Look at the accurate difficulty level of the correct questions in the second quarter for this student, and look at the difficulty level of the correct questions in the second quarter for this student. So when the algorithm sees for the student on the left that, okay, the moment I gave him a medium question again, he got that question wrong as well. So the algorithm thinks that, okay, he probably doesn't have the capability of solving medium questions at all. Varnika says, seems like we have to get the first questions right, but if we are not able to, what if we are not able to do that? See, Varnika, just 1 question in the beginning getting wrong does not create that big of an issue. But he made 4 mistakes in medium question. What you need to, again, guys, understand it this way. This is not just data. You cannot get a question right by just thinking about getting it right. Okay, this is the first question, this is the second question, I'll get it right. No. What you need to understand is you need to have a consistency. You need to have consistency in easy and medium questions. You cannot afford to get them wrong. Easy questions, again, easy questions probably will not matter as much because they only come when you make mistakes in the beginning. So you need to have a consistent accuracy in medium questions, and then you need to do well on hard questions as well. Okay, there is a little bit of a scope for error, but not a huge scope for error exists. So Varnika or Mark, understand the point here. The point here, what I'm trying to make is that GMAT is not about accuracy. GMAT is about skill. You have to show the skill that you're able to get significantly harder questions correct. And you can only get significantly harder questions correct when you get significantly harder questions solved by the test. And in order to get those questions solved, you have to get the first few questions right. Okay, so I'll actually talk about all this and again in another snapshot. But if you look at even the third quarter, both of them had 100% accuracy in the third quarter. But look at the difference in the difficulty level. That's huge. That's huge. So GMAT is, again, I'm not going to the depth of the verbal 21 student, but you can see where his difficulty level chart is. So he definitely made a lot of mistakes in the very beginning itself, and then he started getting the easy ones right, which does not matter. So even if you end up getting the easy ones right, it does not have a good impact on the algorithm. Okay, so Mark says, so need to get enough right in a row to get up to higher level. So getting first few questions wrong, first question wrong doesn't matter, but have to get a good run. Yes, Mark. I would say if possible, don't get the first one wrong. But if you just get 1 question wrong, it won't create that huge an impact. What is important is that you have to have a good run. That's definitely right. Nothing matters more in the test than getting consecutive questions correct, and nothing is worse than getting consecutive questions wrong. And that's why I say RC is probably the most important out of the 3 sections in GMAT. So again, simply putting, skill is what you're looking at, not accuracy on GMAT. You should build the skill to get questions of all difficulty levels correct, of any difficulty level correct. And why am I talking about it? The reason I'm talking about it is because, guys, if you are just focused on solving tons of questions and you are happy with the accuracy in easy and medium ones, it's not gonna make any difference. A lot of people come to me and say, okay, Piyush, when I actually solve OG questions, I have a 80% accuracy. I have a 80% accuracy, but when I take the GMAT or any of the mock tests, my scores are pretty low. Let me ask you guys, how many of you have felt it yourself or you have heard it somewhere that, okay, people do get 80% accuracy in the OGs, but in the actual mock test or actual GMAT, their scores are very low. How many of you have heard that? Quick yes, no in the poll, guys. How many of you have heard that or come across that or have felt it yourself? How many of you have felt it yourself or come across it anywhere else? Okay, Stagnik, you have kind of answered the next question that I was going to ask. I was going to ask, why do you think that happens? Yeah, so that's something that you have kind of answered. I'm so happy, so glad to see that. Alexandra says I am a good example of this. Okay, let me end the poll. I see 94% of you saying yes on this. So this is a very common phenomena, right? All of you have heard it or have felt this yourself. Why does this happen? Understand it this way. OG has only about 10 to 15 hard questions, 10 to 15% hard questions. The rest of them are easy to medium. If you have an 80% accuracy, you're looking at an overall accuracy. You're not looking at accuracy across easy, medium, and hard questions. You think that you are ready for the test. But if you're looking at a 700 plus kind of a number, that 80% accuracy is just a metric. What is more important is, can you get the medium and hard questions right consistently, and how consistently can you get them right? If you can have a winning streak of, let's say, 10, 15 questions back to back correct, you can nail the GMAT and you can get that high 700s as well. Now, that requires a lot of skill. To get the hard questions right, you should be knowing the right methods. Okay, Abhijit has a very important question. Abhijit says, doesn't over focusing on initial questions, assuming those are hard, might lead to running out of time for last questions? Let me tell you guys, all of you, very clearly, I never say you should over focus on initial questions. Anyone who thinks that just giving extra time to initial questions will make them get a question right, you are wrong. You're very, very wrong. Trust me, guys. In my entire experience, I have seen people having this mindset that if I had a lot more, actually a lot better understanding or a lot more time for the test, let's say instead of 2 minutes, I had 2.5 minutes, I would get more questions right. That's not true. In reality, and trust me, guys, I look at 4 to 5 ESRs on a daily basis, new ESRs I'm talking about. I see people making, taking more time in the questions that they get wrong. Okay, so it's not timing because of which you're not getting the question right. Understand it this way. I see ESRs, most of the ESRs say this, that okay, the questions that a student is getting right, they're spending 2 minutes on it, but the questions that the student is getting wrong, they're spending 2 minutes 30 seconds on it. Why does that happen? It happens because you don't know how to solve a question. If you don't know how to solve a question, even if you take more time, slightly more time to do it, you cannot get it right. So Abhijit and all of you who are there in the webinar today, please don't assume that just by giving more time to initial questions, you're going to get that right. Sorry, that's not going to happen. You have to build the skills, right skills to actually develop it. In fact, in the first quarter, you should be spending about a minute 30 or minute 45 seconds maximum in the first quarter, because in the second and the third quarter, the difficulty level will increase and you will need more time there. So again, this webinar is not about test taking or pacing strategy. So I'm not going to get into the depth of that. I'm going to quickly give you a link of one of my webinars where I discuss this taking strategy bit. So I'm not going to entertain any more questions on test taking strategy as well, because the webinar is not focused on this. So just give me 1 minute, guys. I'm going to give you the link for the test taking strategy bit. You can go through this and understand the idea of how to pace yourself during the test. Okay, so I'm going to just quickly paste it here. Link to test taking strategy webinar. I'm going to have added the link and posted it on the top so you guys can actually look at it. Okay, so that's something which you have to understand, guys. So skill is what you're looking at in order to improve your score. So if you're currently at a score of 550 or less, what does this mean? It generally means one simple thing, that probably in the easy questions, you have a decent accuracy. I would say about 80% accuracy is there in the easy questions, because of which you end up getting the medium questions on the test. But your accuracy on the medium question is something around 30 to 40% only. And because of which you don't end up seeing a lot of hard questions. And this generally happens. If you are in this score range at present, it generally means that you are struggling with concepts, because most of the easy questions are totally dependent on concepts. They're direct application of concepts, and medium questions also to an extent slightly more advanced application of concepts, and hard questions are completely approach driven. So think of it this way, that to get the easy questions right, you need, if you have a good understanding of concepts, you can do it. For medium questions getting right, you need equal understanding of both things, application as in method and concepts at the equal level. In hard questions, obviously you will need concepts. I'm not saying you don't, but application is the most important thing there. Like it's mostly 80 to 90% about the application, the method itself. Okay, so what does a score of 550 to 650 signify? If you are in the score range, what it means is that you're getting a very high accuracy on easy questions, maybe something around a 90 to 100% mark. But in medium questions, your accuracy is not that great. It fluctuates. It's somewhere about 60 to 70%. It's not very consistent. And that's why you don't end up seeing a lot of hard questions. You do see some hard questions, but not many. And in those that you see also, your accuracy is pretty low. So in general, what is the biggest problem with these people, and any of you who is in this category right now, the biggest problem with you right now is application. You understand the concepts, and that's why you see a good score here and a decent score here as well. You have an issue only with the way you are approaching the concepts, and you have to improve that understanding overall. You have to improve the understanding overall, and that is something which is important. So if I compare these two categories, the easiest way to understand or simplify it is that if you are in the first category, it means you do not get hard questions at all. In the second category, you get hard questions, but you struggle to get them right. So in simplest form, if you have to identify what is the right strategy to get to a 700 plus score, there are 2 steps to be done. Step number 1, make the algorithm serve you hard questions. So you have to make the algorithm serve you hard questions. And second step, so by making the algorithm serve you hard questions, you'll get to category 2. But the second thing after that is you have to get the hard questions right as well. Because if you do that, then only you can transition to the second 700 plus score. Now, how do you make the algorithm serve you hard questions? That's the next question. You can only do it by getting a high accuracy on easy and medium questions. So definitely concepts is what you need to start with. That's what I'm trying to say. Concepts is something you need to start with, and that's what most people do. But in order to get the hard questions right, you need to learn the right skills and learn how to apply these skills as well. So in simplest format, if you follow the right skills, you will be able to see something like this. So you get to 700 plus, you need to have a 90 to 100% accuracy in easy and medium questions. That is what you need to definitely have. In the hard questions, even if you have, let's say, a 60% accuracy, you can still reach a 700. If you're looking at a 720, 730 kind of a number, then this should be about 75% and so on. So it should get higher and better if you're looking at the high 700s, obviously. But just to enter the 700 club, you can actually get even get there with a 60% accuracy in hard questions. But easy and medium, 90 to 100% accuracy is required. In easy, it is easy. In medium, you still have to improve your application skills. So why solving questions isn't just enough, because when you're solving questions, you're repeating the same mistakes, and without the right skills, you'll not be able to understand or get successful. So right skills are the most important. Now, what is right skills? What is this right skills that I'm talking about? Okay, most people think that skills is only about concept, but no, skill is concept plus application. And many of you might be thinking right now, what do you mean by application, Piyush? Let me ask this as a question. How many of you are thinking that what is this application that you're talking about, Piyush? How many of you are thinking that right now? How many of you are thinking that right now? That what is this application that you're talking about, Piyush? All the time, application, application, application. What does that mean? What does this mean? Quick yes, no on this poll, guys. Okay. Some people are saying yes. Okay. I do see some no's also now. How many of you are thinking, what is this application all about, Piyush? Okay. All right. I see a decent number of responses. Let me end the poll now. Good. So about 3/4 of you are thinking about what this application is. You have been talking about this for about 30 minutes now. Let's get to that. Let's understand what do I mean by application? What does application mean? So to help you understand this, I'm taking an example of a question. Okay. So I'm asking you to solve this question for me. For example, if I have to ask you to solve for X and Y, and given these 2 equations, how will you go about doing it? I'm not interested in the answer. I'm more interested in the approach. Okay, what is the method that you will follow? So please tell me what is that you will do in order to solve this equation for these 2 variables. And I'm going to mute myself and I'll wait for 30-40 seconds for your responses to come in. Okay, so I do see a lot of responses. Mohan says multiply by 2 and subtract. Similar thing is said by Zenya. Equate the coefficients of one of the variables and solve. Good, great guys. I see really good responses from all of you. So yeah, so that's what we do. Like we equate coefficients of one of the variables. That's our step one. Okay, maybe multiply the second equation by 2. Okay, you then eliminate x, you eliminate that particular variable because you equated the coefficient for that particular reason. So you eliminate that variable to get the value of the other one, and then you substitute the other variable to get the value of the first one. Right? We always follow these 3 steps and we always get to the right answer. And this is something we learned in school, like in college, in school, wherever you learned it. You should have learned this approach of solving equations. And if you follow this exact 3 steps, you will always get to the right answer, no matter whatever you do. Obviously, if you're not doing any silly mistakes, that's something which is obviously assumed over here. But if you follow these 3 steps, you will always get to the answer. Now, I could have solved this question in another format. What I could have done is that I could have actually said, okay, let me try putting the value of x as 1. Let's see if that works. I could have tried doing that. Let's try putting x as 1 in the first equation. If I put x as 1, y becomes 6. Let's see if that works in the second equation. 1 minus 12 is minus 11. That's not equal to 5. So yeah, this value is not working. So x equal to 1 will not work. Let me now try taking x equal to 2. I could have done this way, that let's try with x equal to 2 and then x equal to 3. I could have tried that method as well. But do you think that method of taking numbers would have been helpful in this case? Quick yes, no. Do you think that the method of taking numbers would have been helpful in this case over this method that I'm trying now? Yes, no, quickly. Just a poll that you guys have to answer. Okay. Nope is what Giriraj says. Yes, no point, right? So we know a method, we use that method, we always get to the answer. And this is what I'm trying to say when I talk about application. A lot of people do not learn the right application. When I say application, I mean this methodology. Do not learn the right application, the right method to solve a question. In many cases, they will learn shortcuts. They will learn things which where there's no method as well. For example, in most cases, people just read through passages. Don't do any processing, just read through passages, read what is there, and then look at questions and solve questions. And most of the times they're confused. What they're marking, they're not confident why they're marking that answer. Or even in DS, many people don't even follow any approach. It's like they read the question statement, they move to statement 1 and statement 2 right away without doing any analysis whatsoever on the question stem. And that's why you struggle. It's very important if you want to get the medium and hard questions right in that time frame which is given by the GMAT, you have to learn the right methods of solving the question. And let me take an example. When I was a student, learning verbal. I was slightly better at quant, no doubt about that. Verbal was a big time trouble section for me. I was never good at it. I remember when I came across reading comprehension, I actually heard some of these approaches, which I'm going to talk about now, from some of my tutors also, and some of the coaching institutes also. Okay. So first approach that I heard was read the first line and the last line of every para and jump to the questions. Because if you read the first line and the last line of every para, you kind of know what each para is talking about. And then for each question, you can come back to that relevant para and read it if required only. And then you can get it right. The second approach that I heard was read the passage quickly in 2 minutes and try and take a mental note of what lies where and refer back to the passage for every question. The third approach which I heard was read the question first so you know what you're looking for and then answer the questions. Let me ask you guys, which of these approaches are you following today? Let me see your responses in the poll. In the meantime, I'll just take up one question from V. V says, how to remember the various methodologies we learn in our GMAT journey? So again, Vartika, the most important thing that you have to understand is if you're memorizing the method is something that you don't have to memorize or remember. If you actually understand the logic behind that method, and that's why logical methods are important. If you are looking at you're learning shortcuts, then it won't help. You will have to really memorize them. But if you understand the logic behind a method, you'd never have to memorize them or you never have to worry about remembering them. They will naturally come to you. You just have to practice practice those methods on a decent number of questions. And then decent number of questions varies from student to student. But I hope that clears your point. Okay, so I have a lot of votes. I'm just going to end the poll now. So I see a good number of you are going for approach 2, a good number of you are going for approach 3, and a good number of you say, I don't do any of this any of the above mentioned here. So I'm happy to see 43% of you saying that you're not doing any of these because none of these work. Trust me, I actually spent a lot of time doing approach 2, a lot of time doing that. It never works on GMAT. And most commonly, the most common problems that I kind of hear, and I also faced when I was using approach 2 or any of the first 3 approaches, was that I was always confused about the meaning of the passage, and I used to refer, there was always a continuous need to refer to the passage again and again, and this entire thing always led to a low confidence while marking the answers. I was never confident about what the answer choice, what I was marking is right or wrong. That was always an issue with me. Okay. The reason why this happens is because GMAT is not testing you on detail-based questions. So none of the approaches which I talked about earlier is going to work, because all those approaches assume that the questions are asking for something which is lying there in the passage itself. But very rarely, in fact, in only 15% cases, GMAT asks you detail-based questions. 85% of the questions on GMAT is not present in the passage. It is something that you have to infer from the information being provided. Okay, Alexandra, I completely sympathize with you. I have done that myself. I've followed approach 2 for 6 long months, and I bombed the verbal section. I bombed it big time. So I can totally relate to it. The reason it doesn't work is because questions on GMAT are inferential in nature. They will ask you about what is the author most likely to agree with, what is the function of a certain word, or what is the following, which of the following is against the author's opinion. So you have to segregate which one is the author's opinion and which one is not. And the trap that GMAT sets for you is that in 700 level questions specifically, they will not ask you local inferences. Local inferences are those which can be inferred from 1 or 2 lines in the para itself or in a certain para itself. Rather, they will ask you a question which is about global inference, which can only be answered by having a good understanding of the entire passage. So what happens is, if you do not focus on the understanding of the passage in the first go itself, and you rather focus on referring back to the passage or relevant only some parts of the passage to answer a question, you will get stuck with local inferences. Or you will just look at a choice which is talking about something similar to what you reread. Okay? But if you know the entire context better, you will be able to answer the global inference questions better. So that is why it's very important that you build the right skills. So for example, I talked about RC a little. In RC, it is very important to understand the intent of each and every part of the passage, understand the intent of the author, understand what is author's opinion, what is not author's opinion. If there is a fact being used, understand why is the author using that fact. So continuously understand where the author is steering the discussion, not just about looking at why what is written in the passage, rather look at why is that written in the passage. Okay, so Anuj, that's what I'm talking about. You have to focus on involving yourself when you're reading the passage. You have to understand each and every bit, and I'll talk about it a little more as well. So it's about involved and evolved reading. That is something that you have to start doing in order to get a better hang of the passage, because if you understand the passage well, if you're able to do that, that helps you get a pretty solid hold over this inference based questions, and you will never ever struggle with such questions at all. Okay, in case you guys want to look at webinar on this, I'm gonna give you a link to that as well. Just give me 1 second, guys. Yep, oh, this is here. So link to our RC webinar. Again, I'm just giving the link to this webinar. A lot of such webinars are uploaded on the YouTube channel, just like this one. So this is this will take you to our YouTube channel as well. So you can subscribe to the channel to get notification of the previous webinars, the next webinars, and you can go through the previous webinar recordings here as well. Okay. Now let's talk a little about CR as well. So in CR, pre-thinking is the most effective way to solve CR questions. Many people know that. But to most people, pre-thinking is a concept. To them, pre-thinking basically means that it is about pre-thinking the right answer. But that's not what pre-thinking means. Okay? Pre-thinking is about a whole lot more. In fact, pre-thinking is something that happens in step 2. The first step is much more important. If you don't do the first step, you can never, ever, ever pre-think the answer. I talk to a lot of people on a general basis. I kind of come across many people who say, okay, pre-thinking never works for me. And when I see and I ask them to solve a question in front of me, I see in most cases, they are not doing the step 1 at all. They're just reading the argument and trying to pre-think the answer, but that's not how it works. What you need to understand is the most important thing you should do when you're reading the argument is understand the scope of the conclusion. Many people don't even understand what's the right conclusion. So first thing that you need to do is identify the conclusion properly and then understand what is the scope. By scope, I mean identifying what matters in the argument and what does not matter in the argument, as in what impacts the conclusion and what does not impact the conclusion. Only when you're able to understand the scope, you can actually pre-think the answer. Okay? And in fact, in order to help you pre-think, at GMAT-Wiz, we have come up with pre-thinking frameworks. Okay, for example, these are some frameworks that we have come up with, that many arguments, and this is a research that we did on our own to see what are the various type of arguments that are tested on GMAT CR. So we came across these 4 broad argument types, which cover about 70 to 80% of CR questions. Okay, so first type of argument is plan and goal. Okay, second type of argument is comparison. Third type of argument is causality, and fourth type of argument is quant-based. And the good thing is that in each of these arguments, you can actually pre-think in a certain direction. Okay. In fact, this is something which we cover at length in our course. For example, if I take an example of causal argument. Okay. Don't mind this. I think there's a typo in the slide title, but what we meant by this was a causal argument. Okay. So a typical causal argument will have a cause and the effect. Okay. So if the argument is, what you need to do is when you're reading the argument, and if you see an argument of this format, X causes Y, obviously that should be your conclusion. X causes Y is your conclusion. You have to critically identify what is X and what is Y. And then the assumptions, there are these 3 assumptions that you can identify right away. First assumption that the author is making is X happened before Y. Second assumption that the author is making is there's no alternate cause for Y. And the third assumption that the author is making is there is no reverse causality that exists. For example, Y should not be causing X. So these are 3 assumptions that you can think of right away. Okay. Anuj, you should not read the options first. In CR, that's a very bad thing to do, because if you have not done any analysis whatsoever, you have not understand the conclusion or the scope of the conclusion, you will always get stuck with the option choices because they will confuse you a lot. So it's very important that you focus on the right step-by-step method. Okay, so this is about pre-thinking. We call it framework-driven pre-thinking. So overall, the right methods to solve each question type are written on your screen. Sentence correction, meaning-driven approach. CR, pre-thinking. RC, involved and evolved reading, and so on. So these methods should be used in order to perfect the entire approach for different sections on verbal and quant. Okay, so please make sure you're using these methods. If you're not using these methods, you have to change your methods first, then only anything else will work. In fact, if you're interested in learning these methods, we are actually starting another batch of our online GMAT crash course from 26th of June, which is in about 10 days from now, approximately, where we will have a 10-week program where we will help you cover everything which is tested in GMAT, quant, and verbal and get you ready before round 1. So this is a batch which will end in August last week itself. So if you're looking at a fast track improvement before the GMAT, you can look at this. This is one of the best options because you will have an option to get access to 100 hours of online video lessons. You have access to 4,000 plus questions to practice. You have access to 10 mock tests. And then on top of it, there would be 25 live classes, which will happen on Saturdays and Sundays, where we will take up the advanced application of each and every concept tested on GMAT one step at a time. So the format is very simple. What you need to do is you just need to go through these some topics every week which will be assigned to you as homework during the weekdays, and then on the weekends you will have classes, live classes with senior experts on each of those topics, where they will take up 7-8 questions from each topic covering different different varieties, different traps that GMAT tests on each of them. So they will give you one question to solve, and then they will discuss those questions with you to help you understand what is the right approach for solving, and also help you understand how can you avoid those traps, basically. Okay, so if you want to enroll or check out the crash course, you can check out using the link which I've just shared in the chat. Vartika, for round 1 deadlines, you can even take the GMAT in August. That's generally not a problem. Again, it depends on when your round 1 deadlines is. If you're looking at IIMs, probably you need to take it in the second week of August. If you're looking at ISB, the European or US schools, then August end is perfectly fine. Okay, so this is one of the batches that you can look at. We have the two options here. One is the complete batch, which is for quant as well as verbal. That complete batch is running at a special price of $349 right now. This will give you access to all those things which you talked about for 4 months. And if you're looking at a verbal or quant focused batch, just a verbal or quant focused batch, which means instead of 25, you will have 12 sessions, you can get it for a fee of $249. Okay, so in case you are interested in the complete batch, you will be able to enroll directly from the website in the link which is provided over there. And in each batch, we only keep 20 students. That's the maximum limit that we have in a batch. So enroll fast, because all of our crash course batches in the end up being a full house, and slots don't get available for the people who come later. So you can look at this. If you're looking at just verbal or quant only, you can connect with me on support@gmatpliz.com to discuss and get links for the verbal only package as well. Okay, so let's now move to the next part. What should you do? So now we have talked already about what you should not, what most people do. So let's now build a strategy to actually help you improve your score. Because now, first I wanted you to understand what all does it take to improve your score. Now we can actually work on building a strategy around it. So let's get going with that. So what you need to understand is that there would be 3 stages of improvement for you. First stage is the planning stage. You need to sit and plan your prep right. I'm going to talk about the planning stage today in depth, but in case you want to discuss your planning stage with me, you need to understand how you should go about your individual planning for your case. You can definitely discuss it by scheduling a consultation call with me. I'll help you understand how you can do that and how GMAT can also help you in achieving that goal. So you can feel free to connect with me using that link. But first thing you need to understand is exactly how to plan your prep. Because if you don't do the planning right, I have seen many people, I've been in the industry for 9 years now. I've seen many people coming to me in June or July of a particular year, targeting round 1, and they're very, very enthusiastic. They do put in a lot of effort. They even take breaks or leaves from their office. But in many cases, they either don't plan it well or they make mistakes while planning. And that's what leads them to actually spending much more time, and they sometimes end up writing the GMAT in round 2. So I don't want that to happen for you. If you're looking at round 1, you should target round 1. And obviously, round 1 helps you get a better chance on scholarships. So that is something you should do. So definitely planning becomes the most important thing to start off with. Then once you have planned, you then need to, in planning, you have to think about the learning and the solidifying stage. So some bit of learning would be required and some bit of fine tuning or solidifying on the weak areas would be required. So let's talk about these 2 stages separately. So planning, how do you plan? So first thing is, you should focus on 1 section at a time. Ideally, if you're just devoting about 20 hours a week, anything less than 20 hours or 20 hours if you're devoting, you should just focus on 1 section at a time. However, if you're devoting anything more than 20 hours a week, you can do both quant and verbal parallelly. That's fine. Okay. And retakers should work first on their weak section. So let's say verbal is your weak section, then you should work on weak section first. And if you are giving more than 20 hours and verbal is your weak section, again, depends. You should probably give 70% time to verbal or 80% or 60% to verbal, depending on how much improvement you need in your quant score as well. So you have to look at both the things and understand what should be the right split of the effort that you're going to put in both of them. But thumb rule is simple. If you're putting less than 20 hours, probably working on 1 section at a time makes more sense for you. Okay. And approach different sections differently. You cannot approach quant and verbal the same way. There is a slight bit of a difference between the two, and I'll help you understand why am I saying so. So in verbal, for example, you should be tackling 1 module at a time. You should not be working on multiple modules together. So by a module, I mean SC, CR, and RC. So for example, if I'll tell which one you should work on first, but in verbal, you should go module wise. That makes more sense, because in verbal, the modules don't get intermixed. You cannot get a CR question in SC or RC question in CR. They're separate altogether. However, in quant, you should work on topics at a time, one topic at a time, because in quant, it is possible that the modules can get mixed up. For example, it is like, for example, let's say you're doing number properties, okay, and the other module is algebra. So it's possible that some concepts in number properties, some topics in number properties require you to be good in algebra as well. So in quant, it makes more sense to do one topic at a time. Like topics are prime numbers, function circles, profit and loss, etc. Okay, so let's talk about each one of these two one step at a time. So let's first focus on improving your verbal score. So how do you improve your verbal score? So what you do is take a benchmark of 70% and take sectional tests or module-wise tests for SC, CR, and RC. Maybe take up 30 questions each from each area, SC, CR, and RC, and time yourself, take a time quiz, and keep a benchmark of 70%. If your score is less than 70% in a particular area, that falls into group 1, or let me call it a weaker zone. And if your score is more than 70%, that falls into the stronger zone. Okay, so how you should then classify the sequences, that let's say this is the data that you get. SC is at 80%, CR and RC are at 30 and 50% respectively. So clearly your score in SC tells you that SC is a strong suit and CR and RC are a weak suit. So the right sequence of learning for you would be CR, then RC, then SC. And it's not like I've just arranged them in ascending order. You might think of it like this. But honestly, you have to follow this order: SC, then CR, then RC. This is the most logical order in GMAT verbal in your weak areas. So right now, if you see, this student has CR and RC in his weak area. That's why we are saying do CR before RC. Even if his CR score was, let's say, 50% and RC was, let's say, 30%, I would have said the same. Okay, so what you need to do is see which areas are in your weak areas and follow this order as much as possible. For example, if SC and CR are in your weak area, then you should do SC, then CR. If RC and SC are in your weak areas, then SC, then RC is what you should do. Okay, is this point clear to all of you? Quick yes, no, guys over here. Is this point clear to all of you? Quick yes, no on this question. Is data point clear to all of you? Okay, I see 100% yes till now. I see one or two of you saying no as well. Let's see. Okay, so if you have any doubts, one of you seems to have some doubts about it. So do let me know in the chat. I'll be more than happy to answer that for you. But in the interest of time, I'm moving forward. So now let's talk about how to work on your weak areas. So how do you work on your weak areas? So from the same test that you took, that sectional test of 20-30 questions, identify in which topics your score is less than 60%, because it's very likely if your score is less than 70, there are some concept gaps as well. There are some basic gaps as well. So filter out topics. When I say topics, I mean modifiers, or let's say pronouns, or assumptions, strength and weaken, like this. So filter out topics where the score is less than 60% and revise these concepts to solidify your understanding. First, revise these concepts. So if you're using the GMAT course, you can always do that from the course platform itself. In fact, very like in about 5 to 7 days, we are releasing another update of our AI where you can actually click on the revise button and it will automatically create a short video file or short module for you, which will only make you go through areas in which you have concept gaps. So it's gonna be that simple. Just revise button, click on it, and it automatically gives you a module where you just need to work on the concept gaps. It only contains videos from your weaker concept areas. Okay, so what you should do is first understand in which topics you have concept gaps. The filter can be done at a 60% level, and revise these concepts to solidify your understanding first. Okay, and the time required to improve again. And one more thing which I want to add here is not just revise those concepts, try to also focus on learning application of those concepts after covering the concept gaps. So see how you're solving questions and match these this methodology that you're following with the solution to make sure that whatever you are doing is the right way of doing it. Okay, you should not just assume that, okay, this is, I am actually focusing on the meaning-based approach when I'm solving the question. So I'm using the meaning-based approach, then I'm good to go ahead. No, don't assume that. Actually look at the solution, see whether what you understand from the question is exactly what is there in the solution also. The approach should be exactly the same. That's something which is very important for you. Okay, so time required to work on your weak areas. If you have one weak area, let's say SC is your weak area, in about 30 to 40 hours, you can easily improve your verbal score by 4 points by working on your weak areas. And your overall GMAT score improves by about 30 points. So if you have a couple of weak areas in weak sections, basically, then you can improve your verbal score by about 8 points with 60 to 80 hours of effort as well. Now, how you should work on your strong area. So in the strong area, generally if your score is above 70%, there are no concept gaps as such. The only thing that you need to work on is learning the right approach. And I talked about the right approach a little. So CR, for example, it is important for you to analyze the question stem, do pre-thinking properly, and do answer choice elimination as well in the right possible math fashion. So these are 3 steps that you have to follow. Similarly, in SC, you have to understand the intended meaning and then so on. So what you need to do is first learn the right approach. And how do you learn the right approach? So first step, understand the method, understand what are the steps involved in it. Second step, solve about 15 questions, taking them one at a time. Don't do all 15 at once, because understand it this way, the idea here is to learn the application of that method properly. And you can only learn the application of that method properly if you are looking at the solution, if you are reviewing the solution after each question and matching your thought process line by line with the solution to understand if there are any deviations from the method. Because if there are any deviations from the method, then you can actually improve on that in the next question that you're solving. But let's say you solve all 15 questions at once. Then another problem that you have is, by the time you come to the last question, how you approach the first question step by step is not fresh in your mind. But when you're just doing one question at a time, how you approach that question, what is that you did in the first step, second step, how you read it, everything is very fresh in your mind. Okay, so at that moment itself, if you review the solution, it kind of helps you get a better understanding of the method and a better grab over what is the deviation between the right method and your method of solving the question. Okay, is this part clear to all of you guys? Quick yes, no over here. Is this part clear to all of you? Why you should do one question at a time and not tons of questions at once to improve your methods? To improve your method? Let's see a quick yes, no over here. Okay, I see a big number of responses. Let's wait for 5 more minutes. Not 5 more minutes. I meant 5 more seconds. My bad. Okay, so I see 88% yes and 11% no. So I guess one of you is not clear. If you're not clear, please feel free to ask me. I'm more than happy to answer in chat. Don't be shy. Don't think about it. If you have any doubts, please feel free to interact and I'll be happy to help you understand that. So one problem that a lot of people face is that how do they get solutions in a methodical way? Because in most cases, again, this is something which I also faced as a student myself when I was a student, that most of the solutions that I looked at, they just, especially in verbal, they just tell me why one option is right and why the other 4 are wrong. There is no line of reasoning being provided that, okay, how do I understand the meaning of the sentence, or what is the meaning of the sentence, or how do I pre-think, what is the scope of the argument, what is the conclusion. There were very few questions where the right approach was explained, but in most of the cases it was just about option choice analysis. This is right, this is wrong. And this is a big problem that we faced as students. And that's why when we were creating GMAT-Viz, we ensured that every solution follows a methodical approach. In fact, that's why we spend twice the effort on writing the solutions. And we saw that most people in the industry were not even spending half the effort on writing solutions. They were only focused on creating a question, and then solutions were written in a hurry all the time. But we spend a lot of time making sure that all the solutions are methodical. In fact, we went a step further and came up with the idea of this concept booster, where you get to solve only one question at a time, which is followed by analysis of the solution, in-depth analysis of the solution that you can do in order to figure out the gaps in your application. And the best part about the concept booster is it's not just one question at a time. All the questions covered in concept boosters are handpicked and they cover a different aspect of the topic. For example, if you're doing a concept booster on primes, we have done our in-depth research to identify all varieties of questions that have ever appeared on GMAT, which are available in public domain on prime numbers. So let's say we found about 200 to 300 questions exist on primes. We kind of categorize them into buckets: category 1, category 2, category 3 of error, category 4, and so on. So what we make sure in the concept booster is that you get at least one question of each variety. So the idea here is that if you get one question of each variety and you are seeing the solution, which is using the best possible method of solving the question, you are prepared for tackling anything and everything that can come your way from that topic. So it won't happen on the test day that you suddenly see a new question which you're not prepared for. We don't want that to happen. And that's why the concept boosters help you a lot. Okay. And in fact, you will see in every topic, the concept boosters are present. You can see over here in primes, these are the 2 concept boosters which are there. In every single topic, you will find this concept booster lessons. Okay. So once you have understood the application of concepts, first thing is understanding and learning the method. Then after learning the method, it's important that you practice it a lot, you master it. And in that case, practicing 30, 40 questions using the approach is important. Now, when you're doing this, you can do it in set of 5 to 10 questions. Okay. First 15, you should do one at a time because that kind of develops a sound understanding of the methodology. Okay. But now you're just practicing to improve your timing. So if you have understood the method properly in the first 15, now just take 5-10 questions in a set and do about 30 to 40 questions. And then you will be able to internalize the process, which will automatically reduce time. Because initially when you're learning a new method, always remember that it will take you a slightly more time than usual to get those questions solved with that methodology. So don't, in the beginning itself, try to improve your approach at the same time improve your timing. Both won't happen at the same time. You have to focus on one thing. Initially, your focus should be on approach. And with this 30 to 40 questions that you're solving, your focus should also be on the method, like reducing the timing part of it. Okay. And when you're solving this 30, 40 questions, even then you have to review each solution. You cannot leave the review part at all at any stage. You always have to review the solutions for every single question that you're solving. Because when you review the solutions, you're learning a lot more from that particular question. Okay. So in order to improve your strong area in verbal, about 15 to 20 hours of time per module will be sufficient, and it will increase your verbal score by easily and overall score as well. For example, if you have 2 areas in your strong area, then 30 to 40 hours of effort on these 2 areas, like 15 to 20 on each. So total 30 to 40 will improve your verbal score by up to 4 points and your overall GMAT score by up to 30 points. Now let's talk about how to improve verbal quant score. Now, before I go to that, are all of you clear about how to improve your verbal score? Quick yes, no in this poll. Are all of you clear about how to improve your verbal score? Let's see some responses from you in the poll. Are all of you clear about that? In case you are not clear, please feel free to ask me any questions that you have in the chat. Just want to make sure all of you have internalized this. Are you guys clear about how to improve your verbal score? Okay, good. I'm going to end the poll now. So that's good to know that everyone is clear. So let's proceed to quant then. So how to improve your quant score? So first thing is identify the areas for improvement. So take 30 questions each from number properties, algebra, word problems, and geometry, and distribute the topics. When I say topics, I mean prime numbers, divisibility, and so on. Classify the topics that you are using into 3 buckets. Okay, 2 buckets. Less than 60% concept gaps, between 60 and 85% application gaps. The reason I'm saying so is because if you have concept gaps in an area, that has to be treated differently. For example, you have to first start with learning the concepts and the formulas, then learn how to solve the questions, and then practice 10 to 15 to 20 questions on that topic before moving ahead. If you have application gaps, on the other hand, you just have to work on the methodology. Okay, improve your methodology of solving questions. Most likely you're solving questions randomly or maybe using shortcuts. So use better methods and practice about 10 to 15 questions. That should be enough. If you're a GMAT student, this could be done through our video lessons. We have video lessons associated with this. This couldn't be done from the concept boosters. Okay, and the last one can be done through practice quizzes. Okay, So for the application gap, you will only be doing the concept booster and the practice quiz. For the concept gap, you'll be doing all 3 activities. Okay. So in which order should you do all of that? So after you have classified each topic into these 2 buckets, then work in this order. For example, let's say you have linear equations in category 1, concept gaps, and solids in category 1 and LCM GCD in category 1. So don't do, and let's assume that this is in category 2 and this is in category 2 and this is in category 2. So don't do all category 1 first, that okay, you did linear equation and then you did LCM GCD and then you did solids. No, not like that. You should follow this order as it is. Okay, this order as it is. So right now you should not be worrying about number basics. You should not be worrying about fractions, decimals, estimation, rounding. You should only be worrying about these 3 and do in this order. Don't worry about exponents. Again, I'm assuming that you have 85% score in exponents. Basically, it is not in category 1 or category 2. Okay, so that's how you arrange the topics and you work on the topics individually. Okay. So that is very important. Now, if you're a GMAT student, what we can do for you is, if you don't want to get through any of the hustle and bustle of this, we have a AI-driven mechanism which will automatically take your diagnostic quizzes at every stage in the course, and it will automatically identify what you know. So that way, it will only make you focus on the concepts that you are weak at, and then it will take you to the booster lessons for them. So it's a very simplified process. We don't want you to use your head. The AI uses efficiency to personalize your learning. We want you to use your head only for learning purposes, not for planning. That's our motto. Okay. So if time required to improve your quant score, for 1 point improvement, about 8 to 10 hours of effort would be needed. So if you're looking at 3 to 4 points improvement in your quant score overall, about 20 to 40 hours of effort would be needed overall, 25 to 40 hours, sorry, and it will improve your overall score by up to 40 points. So in order to summarize, this is how you can improve your score. Start working on quant or verbal if you have less than 20 hours. In verbal, create 2 groups. Group 1, less than 70%. Group 2, more than 70%. In group 2, build the right application skills. For group 1, work on both concepts and application. And about 60 to 80 hours of effort can improve your verbal score by about 8 points. In quant, for example, work on weak concepts first. And about 25 to 40 hours of effort can improve your score by up to 4 points. Overall improvement can be up to 40 points. So this is a quick summary of what we discussed today. And this brings us to the end of the webinar, and I'm opening it formally for the Q&A. In case you have any questions till now, any questions in your mind, this is the time when you can go ahead and ask your queries to me. Okay, so please feel free to ask any questions that you have in your mind. In the meantime, I'm again want to run you through this. This is a crash course that we are starting from 26th of June. This is targeted towards people who are looking at admission in round 1, applying in round 1 basically. This batch starts from 26th of June, which is in 10 days, and it ends in August end. So it will cover all the basics of, it is covering everything in quant and verbal from the basics, from the scratch as well. And it's a fast-paced batch. You need about 20 to 25 hours of weekly commitment in order to cover up everything on this batch. And this will give you access to the entire online course, which contains 100 hours of videos, 4,000 plus questions, and 10 mock tests with it. Along with this, you will have 25 live classes with our senior experts. In this live classes, we take up advanced application of concepts. And in the weekdays, we want you to cover the basics from the course itself. So this is a crash course which we are running. It is for both quant and verbal. The price is a very attractive $349 only for all the services that you're talking about. If you're only interested in verbal or quant, you can get the same thing for $249. The link will not be available on the website, but you can write to us on support and get the link for a verbal or quant crash course. Okay, so let me take questions from you guys. I have seen a good number of questions now. Gautami says when to take mocks. Good point, Gautami. So ideally, you should be taking mocks, Gautami, when you have identified and worked on your weak areas as well. If you have a lot of weak areas, when I say weak areas, I mean those areas where you have concept gaps. Then if you are taking mocks, even with those weak areas in place, you're probably not going to improve much. So maybe take one mock, but don't take a lot of mocks, because first thing is you should focus on is improving those weak areas. Then only you'll see an improvement in the mocks. So first thing is to build a skill where you're not having any weak areas, as in at least conceptually. And also work on your timing at the same point. Hari Simran says, So can you mention few things one should do to improve RC, as you mentioned all about available approaches that don't work usually. So again, Harisimran, this webinar is not about RC. So again, I don't want you to talk about just a few things because I have already done those few things. I told about how you should read. You should focus on the intent of the author. If there's a fact, you have to understand why is the author using that fact. And if there's an opinion, you should understand what is like whose opinion is it? Is the author opinion or someone else's opinion? So you have to involve yourself in reading it. And I'm giving you the link to actually check out our RC webinar recording. This is a 2-hour webinar where we'll not just talk about few things, we'll actually talk about RC at length. So you can check it out and it will give you a pretty good idea about what it is. Okay. V has a question. Can you throw some time on other parts of GMAT test, AWA? How can you prepare for it? So Vartika, again, a very good question. AWA. Okay, so how do I put it? Let me answer it this way. AWA is just an extension of sentence correction and critical reasoning. If you are good at these two, you can do wonders on AWA without much of a prep. In fact, just to give you a sense of an idea on this, I wrote my very first AWA essay on the GMAT directly. I did not practice AWA at all before that. Okay. And on the way to the test center itself, I just read this Chinese one template on the way. And I wrote my very first essay on AWA directly on the day of the test. And I scored a 5.5 on 6. And the reason was not just this template. The reason was also because I was good in CR and SC. Because AWA is just an extension of that. In AWA, you have to read an argument, identify the conclusion, identify the strengtheners and the weakeners, and write an analysis of it in grammatically correct fashion. So it's basically SC and CR, nothing else. Okay. So you can learn it very easily if you're improving SC and CR. And IR, again, I know that was the next question which is going to come. So Mohan, if you're looking at IR, IR is again an extension to word problems in quant. IR only tests your understanding of averages, percentages, a little bit of mixtures if required, not directly but indirectly, profit and loss, these concepts which are in word problems. So if you do word problems correctly and you have an understanding of how to read those charts, which can be developed in about 2 to 3 days of effort through the official guide and GMAT Club itself, you can do a good job on IR. And trust me, AWA and IR are not critical. They don't impact your score out of 800. I have even asked this question to the top 10 B school adcoms on their face, that how do you evaluate IR and AWA? And the kind of responses that I got could be literally translated to saying that we don't really care about it a lot. Okay. One of them said that we look at IR score if a student performs poorly in quant or he's from a non-quant background. But trust me, I have rarely seen a person doing well on IR and not doing well on quant. It's very rare because it's an extension of quant, as I said. And the second thing is, if you have a low quant score, you'll probably have a low overall GMAT score as well. And then your IR score is probably not going to be looked at all because they have a cutoff of GMAT that they will actually find first filter and then only look at IR and AWA. So anything above 5 in IR, anything above 4 in AWA is good enough. Okay, so don't worry about them as much. About a couple of days, just account for IR and AWA. Other than that, focus on quant and verbal first. That's much more critical. I hope that answers your questions, guys. Varnika, does the crash course help people prepare for AWA? Yes, we do help you because crash course helps you prepare for SC and CR. But is there a session specifically for AWA? No. We guide you. Like obviously SC and CR, if you improve, you can do well on AWA, and all of our students have done well on that. Happy to help, Vartika. Okay, so I think I have answered all the questions now. Anyone else has any questions in their mind? Feel free to ask me. In case you're looking at registering or creating a personalized study plan for you, you can register for our free trial as well. I've just sent the link posted the link on the top. Okay. Okay, so I don't see any other question now. I'm gonna wait for a minute more maybe, just to see if anyone else has any question. Okay, so I don't see any other question. So no worries, guys. It was great to interact with you. I hope the webinar today helped you get some idea about how to go about your GMAT prep and how to improve your score. In case you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me on the details mentioned on your screen. Thank you so much.